Susanna Salter was the first elected woman mayor in the country. I think it's hilarious that it really was supposed to be a joke, and the joke was on them because she ended up winning.
History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
You can see how it would be somewhat easy to miss stories. Oh, right here, yeah. How is this Susanna Medora Salter of Argonia, Kansas?
It says female mayors are no good.
If you did this, you were considered pretty radical.
She's kind of paved the way for women. It's pretty cool. It really is.
Women do stuff all the time, but they're not thinking over 100 years ago.
Kansas was...
I hope that such equality could be carried out in other fields.
It was exceptional. It was a fascinating history.
The women got together and said, we need to be together and we need to have a vote.
The first women's lib movement met with victory on August 26, 1920, when their right to vote was recognized by the Congress.
There's so many of the same themes and issues that show up today were showing up in the 19th century.
I think that those ideas still exist. We are still hearing those kind of sexist things.
She raises her voice, and when a lot of women do,
she knew how it made her look. So alternately soppy and bitchy. She'd stop it, but she can't help herself, can she?
When she comes on television, I involuntarily cross my legs.
Men are allowing women to take over the world.
It is, quite frankly, revolting and disturbing and extremely troublesome.
I can throw a punch as good as I can take one.
I still think that we're fighting against a mindset, right, that somehow women are not capable.
Equality's coming. We're not there yet.
The women ran and the women won.
It's really starting from the beginning of kids thinking about what is even possible for them to even do.
The story of Kansas's trailblazing women starts long ago, years before the start of the Civil War.
This Bleeding Kansas era that really defined this state, and Missouri as well. I mean, literally, this state shed blood in order to have it be a free state.
Kansas was founded on principles of freedom. It came with a price. Kansas abolitionists fought pro-slavery groups in violent and often bloody battles.
What does it mean to be free was a question that continued to be brought up time and time again. And women really used that to their benefit when they were fighting for their own equal rights.
Many abolitionists believed in equal rights for all, including enslaved people and women. The violent movement to keep slavery out of Kansas helped spark the start of the Civil War. I'm Haley Harrison. A prominent figure in the Bleeding Kansas era was John Brown, but not even the militant abolitionist himself knew how his fight would lay the groundwork for another fight, granting women the right to vote.
Early on, from the very beginning of Kansas being a state, you have women like Clarina Nichols, who came out here for the purpose of fighting for abolition, but at the same time, she was also fighting for women's rights.
Strong women were drawn to the Kansas prairie. Abolitionist Clarina Nichols arrived from Vermont in 1854. The women's rights advocate was an editor of an anti-slavery newspaper and started speaking publicly about equality for women. Within 5 years, she'd gained enough signatures to enter the male-dominated political forum, the Wyandotte Constitutional Convention.
So I love to highlight Clarina Nichols.
At the Watkins History Museum in Lawrence, historian Sarah Bell explains one woman helped secure the first voting rights for all Kansas women. It unfolded at the state's Constitutional Convention.
She was the woman who sat in the Wyandotte Constitutional Convention doing her knitting and not able to actually address the convention or be a formal delegate, but she was there, and her negotiations with the male delegates after the formal convention during the day was able to grant women the right to vote in school elections.
Clarina was quietly instrumental in advancing women's rights in the state. 2 years after attending the convention in 1861, Kansas becomes the first state to broadly grant women the right to vote in school district elections.
Women's suffrage leader, Mrs. Carrie Chapman Catt.
The organized woman movement dates from 1848, when a convention to consider the rights of women was held in Seneca Falls, New York. The committee drafting the list of woman's wrongs found her grievances against the government of men to be the same number that American men had had against King George.
Political pioneers like Carrie Chapman Catt set their sights on Kansas. There was a groundswell of support in the town of Leavenworth from its mayor and newspaper publisher Daniel Anthony. His sister, Susan B. Anthony, was already one of the movement's most prominent figures. She wasn't alone. Other trailblazers at work in Kansas included Lucy Stone and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Suffragists' hopes now rested with Kansas, patriots fighting for equality.
Historically, Kansans themselves were calling themselves progressive during this 19th century. They thought it was going to be the first state to give women full suffrage voting rights. They so believed this.
But even in a free state like Kansas, not even the fight for equality was equal.
Pictured here is Mary Dillard, who was one of the more prominent African-American suffragists in the Lawrence movement.
Mary Dillard, or Mamie, was the only black student in her graduating class at Lawrence High School. She joined the suffrage movement alongside other black women like Carrie Langston. Carrie's son and future poet Langston Hughes was Mamie's student at Lawrence's Pinckney School. But as these women demanded racial and gender equality, the women's suffrage movement was about to betray them.
Unfortunately, at this time, African-American women really weren't as accepted within kind of the bigger organizations like that were led by Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a lot of those more the white women that were leading those.
Black men were also fighting for the vote. Susan B. Anthony was one of the voices decrying the effort, saying it would cause
antagonism everywhere between educated, refined women and the lower orders of men.
Her racist views shattered alliances with abolitionists who supported women's rights, like Frederick Douglass. 2 years after the Civil War, Kansas becomes the first state to officially consider a women's suffrage referendum and voting rights for black men. White male voters rejected both. 3 years later, black men got the right to vote with the 15th Amendment. Women still had a long battle ahead. Soon, other states west of the Mississippi began considering their own women's rights laws. And by 1893, 13,000 women nationwide were card-carrying suffragists.
There's this great image right after 1912 when Kansas actually did pass the right to vote for all women. And you see this woman walking across the country and all these states in her wake, all these western states that had passed the right to vote and going east. And this wave is going east.
From the wave of progress, the tide was slowly turning in America thanks to a powerful alliance with another activist group, the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
The most shocking thing to me today is the fact that women are standing beside the men at the bars drinking. Oh, it's terrible.
As recently as 1947, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, meeting in Pasadena, California.
The group, led by Frances Willard, championed prohibition.
The time was when mothers and children stayed outside the saloon and wept. And now they can go inside and drag father out. The trouble is that very often the mothers and children have to be dragged out themselves.
The union had more than 150,000 members, more than 10 times the number of registered suffragists. But women in both groups demanded the same thing, to be heard.
Drusilla Wilson, who I just love that photo of her. She looks so stern.
The Prohibition era is marked by strong images of female patriots, like hatchet-wielding Kansan Carrie Nation, who used her weapon to demolish bars across the state. Carrie was jailed several times and sold souvenir hatchets to help pay her fines. And she wasn't the only one.
Really to think about the understandings of social expectations at the time of women. So women really were not supposed to be in politics, and they were not supposed to be out and like advocating for this in public. And if you did this, you were considered pretty radical. And radical in the sense that you were stepping so far outside of these boundaries that there was concern that you were not womanly enough, not feminine enough.
As suffragists and prohibition supporters gained power, activists aligned with the Republican majority to push their cause. It worked.
They were really politically savvy.
Progressive Kansas leading the way for the nation once again, becoming the first state to ban alcohol in 1881.
Alcohol is a detriment to youth.
Temperance Union chapters soon sprang up across the state supporting the cause. Some of the fiercest opponents of women's rights were anti-suffrage groups, led by other women. One woman even taking pen to paper, writing Kansas Governor John Martin.
The suffragists have the persistency of fanatics and cranks.
Her plea, keep voting rights away from women. But when Kansas lawmakers passed a bill giving women the right to vote in city elections in 1887, Governor Martin signed it into law. Women would have their say in the upcoming elections, just weeks away. At that same time, deep in the Kansas prairie, in the tiny town of Argonia with its 416 inhabitants, a young mother of 4 was at home, doing the wash, unaware she was about to make history.
At the time, I mean, she's pretty young when this happens, right?
Yeah, late 20s.
Not even she could have predicted what was about to happen, and neither could the men who were behind the whole scheme.